Before we get started on today's video, Raiders Report host Mitchell Renz came to me this morning and said, hopefully you had a really nice weekend, but I don't believe you can get 450 likes to close out the month of June. We've already beaten the record. You guys have done an amazing job. So one final time, hit that thumbs up button before we break down the latest in the NFL and a massive blockbuster trade. What's going on, Broncos country? Welcome into the Broncos Breakdown by Chat Sports. My name is Moose, and we're going to start off the show a little bit different than we usually do. It's not often that you get some blockbuster news in the NFL, and this is definitely a crazy trade. So Adam Schefter was the first one that broke it. The Miami Dolphins have agreed to trade Jalen Ramsey to the Pittsburgh Steelers in exchange, and then Tom Pelissero goes on, by the way, to kind of confirm all of this, for Jonnu Smith, a 2027 seventh-round pick, and Minkah Fitzpatrick. So, if you wanted to make sure you got all of the details correct, here's what the finalized trade looks like. The Steelers get Jalen Ramsey, Jonnu Smith, and a seventh-round pick. The Dolphins receive a fifth-round pick and Minkah Fitzpatrick. Now, why does this affect the Broncos? Does it affect the Broncos? I'm sure you're wondering because it's the Broncos breakdown. We're not talking about the Miami Dolphins, and we're not talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I believe that in an indirect way, this does affect the Broncos based off of what I call the FOMO effect in the NFL, which we'll touch on here in just a little bit. So based off of everything that you saw, though, I have a question for you. Who won that Miami-Pittsburgh blockbuster trade? Type S for the Steelers, type D for the Dolphins, both AFC teams. Both were maybe looking at potential wild card spots in their respective divisions and in the AFC. One of them, I only believe now, is going to end up making the playoffs. It's the Steelers, so I think the Steelers won this for sure. So back to what I said originally. How does this affect the Denver Broncos? It doesn't directly. The Broncos don't play the Steelers or the Dolphins in 2025, so you probably are just looking at this and going, who cares? Two other teams. However, based off of what I like to call the FOMO effect, and when you see a player of Jalen Ramsey's caliber go off the market, teams absolutely do start to scramble. And that's where I believe the Broncos can come into effect here, because the Broncos have a surplus of cornerbacks, really good cornerbacks as well. And I'm sure there have been a multitude of teams that are exploring different areas and the Broncos. And like I said, in terms of an overarching, does it directly affect Denver? No, and it doesn't affect Denver's ability to make the playoffs either. Why? Because last year, the Dolphins didn't make the playoffs and the Steelers did, but they got bounced first round just like the Broncos. So believe it or not, this is kind of what my predictions look like for the AFC in terms of making the playoffs or not making the playoffs. This doesn't include anything in terms of seeding quite yet, so here's what I will say. The Bills make the playoffs, the Dolphins don't, Jets don't, and the Patriots are right on the line, but I also think they miss out on the playoffs. Then that goes to the AFC West. I think three teams make the playoffs. Chargers, Broncos, Chiefs, and the Raiders, obviously, not quite there yet, although getting the train back on the track. I believe the AFC West is easily the best, if not the second best entire division in the AFC. So let's talk about the official playoff prediction, right? Because with this whole trade going down, I do believe Pittsburgh squeaks back into the playoffs with that number 7 seed. 10-7, they've got Aaron Rodgers, traded for DK Metcalf, traded away George Pickens, drafted Caleb Johnson, traded away Najee Harris. They have clearly revamped the look of their offense. And I do think, while they're not a heavyweight hitter in the AFC, they are at least a playoff contender. Now, you'll notice that I have the Broncos there at number 3. I still think the Broncos win the West. So again, it doesn't directly affect the Broncos, but it could affect teams that end up playing the Dolphins or playing the Steelers, because now the Dolphins have all offense and zero defense. Have you taken a look at the Dolphins quarterback room right now? It is pitiful, probably one of the worst in the NFL. And the Steelers will absolutely be better than they were last season. There's no doubt in my mind. Not quite as loaded as the Broncos or the Chiefs, but still a fairly enough good team. So how does it affect the Denver Broncos? Well, now there are going to be teams that are aggressive in the cornerback market. And there's a handful of teams that are very needy for cornerbacks right now that I'm sure saw this move and said, we are absolutely going to make a move and try to get another performance level corner in our roster. Now, before we break down who those teams are and what one team has already said has interest in one Broncos player, do me a favor. Start shopping Fanatics today. And I know we've talked all the last couple of weeks about all the great items at Fanatics, but this particular Broncos t-shirt, this Performance Nike tee, is 60% off right now. You're not going to find a much better deal than that, my friends. So here's what you got to do. Go to the comments and description of today's video and use the link that I've put there and start shopping today. I have found a multitude, a cornucopia of deals, if you will. This is just the best one out of them right now. I've also put that up on our YouTube page for you to look at as well. So if this doesn't tickle your fancy, there's plenty of other items that you can start shopping with today. Okay, so the Cowboys. And this is going to make sense, trust me. I probably realize you're thinking this is all just a bunch of, out in the ether stuff. The Cowboys were all in on Jalen Ramsey, and they need a quarterback. In fact, if I look at the Cowboys cornerback depth chart right now, it's okay. Kyer Elam was traded from the Bills, and he's not that great. Savone Revel is coming off a really nasty leg injury, and he's a rookie. So you really have to start looking at the Cowboys and saying you really only have two solidified cornerbacks, and none of them really have star potential other than Diggs, who is terrible in coverage. So the quarterback needy teams right now look like this: the Panthers, Cowboys, Packers, Raiders, Rams, Chargers, Dolphins, and the Minnesota Vikings. Only one of these teams, the Cowboys that I listed, have really a big need for one of the Broncos players that was actually listed in multiple Broncos reports: Ja'Quan McMillian. Cowboys have listed Ja'Quan McMillian as a trade asset and have expressed very high interest in bringing in Ja'Quan McMillian. There's one guy that covers the Broncos. He's kind of a beat reporter, podcaster, hybrid kind of guy. His name is Brian Martin. And here's what he had to say about Ja'Quan McMillian: whether to provide some much-needed depth in the slot or to add as a potential starter, the nickel cornerback position is one we wouldn't be surprised to see the Cowboys target at some point for the remainder of the offseason. And with that in mind, they should inquire about Denver Broncos cornerback Ja'Quan McMillian. And if we take a look at what J-Mac did last year on the field, starting caliber nickel corner for sure. Without a doubt, if we didn't draft Ja'Quan Barron, he'd absolutely be a more than capable starter. But now with Barron, that opens the door for a lot of teams to start flooding in with phone calls and saying, hey, you know that kid you drafted with pick number 20? Yeah, you're going to start him. So what are you doing with Ja'Quan McMillian? And the Broncos cornerback room is loaded. It's loaded. So you could, hypothetically, in theory, keep everyone that you've got right now and just roll out with one of the most studded defenses in the NFL, the most driven defense in the NFL. Or you could look and say, okay, we'll take your call. What are you going to offer him? Because I look at this and I say, if the Cowboys have already expressed major interest, then you have to think, producer Alper, if you want to throw up those cornerback needy teams one more time, you have to think that a multitude of these teams are also making calls. The Green Bay Packers could make a call. They got rid of Jair Alexander. The Vikings, they could make a call. They want someone on the opposite end of Byron Murphy. The Dolphins now definitely need a corner. So the Panthers could use all the help that they can get. I'm listing all of these teams that I bet you any amount of money are in a panic right now and trying to make something happen to get a new corner, someone that has absolutely been proven. And Ja'Quan McMillian has been listed as one of those players. So should the Broncos take phone calls on Ja'Quan McMillian? I don't think they're interested in trading him right now, but if the event that, Jerry Jones decided to call up George Paton and say, hey there, buddy, what you going to take? I think that would be stupid of George Paton to not at least entertain the idea that there might be some trade value there for Ja'Quan McMillian. That will do it for us on today's episode. Reminder to like the video if you already haven't, subscribe if you already haven't, and as always, be cool.